A man wearing a worn-out coat, scuffed shoes, and a faded backpack was standing in the first-class line. No one recognized who he was. No one could have guessed what was about to unfold. That morning, Chicago O'Hare International Airport was packed. People rushed about, dragging suitcases behind them like streams of frantic energy. The sound of overhead announcements, wheels rolling across tile floors, and children crying all blended into that unmistakable hum unique to airports. Amid the hurried crowd, a man stood still. He didn't draw attention, or more accurately, no one bothered to pay him any. His name was Nathan Cole. He wore nothing more than a wrinkled plaid shirt, a faded khaki jacket, and a pair of cracked leather hiking boots. In his left hand was a boarding pass. In his right, he dragged an old travel backpack, the kind that looked like it had seen one too many roads. He stood in the first-class check-in line, not because he sparkled with luxury, but because he stood out for being so completely out of place. Right behind him stood another man, Travis Grant, a young investment entrepreneur who had once graced the cover of a major business magazine. Tailored Italian suit, Swiss watch, expensive cologne, he radiated a kind of success you could practically smell from across the room. Travis glanced Nathan up and down, a brief look, but it delivered a clear message. "You're in the wrong line." Then his voice cut through the air, soft, but unmistakably condescending. "First class. Huh. Didn't realize just anyone could get in nowadays." Nathan turned to him, eyes calm like a still morning lake. He didn't snap back. He didn't flinch. He simply replied, "The world's full of surprises." "Isn't it?" Travis frowned. He seemed to want more, a flash of anger, a stumble, anything to prove his point. But Nathan gave him nothing, and that was just the beginning. The 13-hour flight to Tokyo, what should have been an ordinary trip, was about to become the stage for a confrontation no one saw coming. Not between two passengers, but between arrogance and humility, between prejudice and truth, and ultimately between one man desperate to prove himself and another who had long stopped needing to. The plane was preparing for takeoff. First-class passengers began boarding the luxurious cabin, where wide leather seats, soft lighting, and champagne in crystal glasses awaited. Travis Grant stepped in first. He was no stranger to red carpets, respectful nods from flight attendants, and the admiring glances of those around him. He adjusted his tie, straightened his cuff, and walked into the cabin like he owned the plane. Right behind him was Nathan Cole. His pace was steady, his eyes scanning the space like it was all new to him, not hurried, not judging, not guarded. Travis turned his head, ready to locate his seat. When? He froze. Seats 1A and 1B. Travis 1A, Nathan 1B. Annoyance flickered across his face. Unbelievable, Travis muttered. Of all the seats, it had to be next to me. Nathan offered only a soft smile. He gently set down his backpack, removed his jacket, and took his seat. Tilting his head, he spoke with polite ease. "Looks like we'll be traveling together." Travis didn't respond. He leaned back in his seat, crossed one leg over the other, and shot a sideways glance at the man beside him, an assessing, judgmental look. To Travis, first class was a realm for people like him, those who were worthy. And Nathan, with his clothes, his manner fit none of the boxes of a successful entrepreneur or any refined person Travis had ever known. But there was something unexplainable. Nathan didn't shrink, nor did he try to prove anything. He simply existed, steady, quiet, as if all the noise and glitter around him had nothing to do with him. That unsettled Travis, because when we can't categorize someone by their appearance, we start to fear them. The plane began to roll down the runway. A fleeting moment of peace passed, but it didn't last long. Travis spoke first, not because he wanted to make conversation, but because he couldn't stand the silence coming from the man beside him, the one he believed didn't belong in this world. "What do you do for a living?" Travis asked. His tone was casual, but the glint in his eyes gave him away. Nathan, who had been leaning down to tuck his backpack neatly under the seat, looked up and replied, "I work in the film industry." Travis raised an eyebrow. "Oh, short films, YouTube videos or something?" Nathan offered a soft smile, shook his head slightly. "You could say that." Travis let out a laugh that barely concealed its sarcasm. "A filmmaker flying first class. Guess this era really is full of surprises." He leaned back in his seat, idly spinning the expensive ring on his finger. "You know, I find it fascinating people who try so hard to appear humble, yet clearly want to wedge themselves into spaces they don't belong." Nathan didn't respond right away. He looked Travis straight in the eyes, not with anger, not with fear, just a silence so steady it made the other man uneasy. And then he spoke just one line. "Maybe sometimes the places we think aren't meant for someone are exactly where they belong." The air between them thickened. Travis scoffed, trying to mask the sting of being challenged. Philosophical. "Huh. Sounds more like something you'd find on the internet than from someone who actually knows what success is." Nathan turned toward the window, his gaze drifting into the clouds beyond. Travis, irritated by the lack of response, raised his voice slightly. "Don't get me wrong. I'm not being hostile. It's just with the way you're dressed, the way you carry yourself. Do you really think people see you as someone?" Nathan turned back, and this time there was a depth in his eyes. "I'm not here for anyone to see who I am. I'm just sitting in the seat printed on my ticket." The words cut like a quiet blade, not aggressive, but they struck Travis hard. Neither of them said anything more, but the passengers around them, though not intentionally eavesdropping, had begun to notice. The way Nathan responded, not with bitterness, not with insecurity, but with calm confidence, made people start to question their initial assumptions. What kind of man draws attention not by boasting, but by simply being? The conversation may have seemed to end, but for Travis, it hadn't. He couldn't stomach the feeling of being put in his place. He wasn't used to people not reacting the way he expected. Nathan's composure, it didn't calm Travis. It threatened him. The flight had reached cruising altitude. Flight attendants began serving drinks. As usual, Travis signaled the moment he saw a server, a glass of Dom Perignon. "The most expensive one, please. I like the feeling of being treated properly." The flight attendant gave a polite nod, maintaining her professionalism. When she turned to Nathan, she asked with the same respectful tone, "And for you, sir?" "Just water, thank you." Nathan replied, his voice low and calm. Travis burst out laughing. "Water? In first class? Why not fly a budget airline while you're at it?" A few nearby passengers frowned slightly. They were beginning to notice the contrast not just in class, but in character. Nathan remained unfazed. He took the bottle, turned it slowly in his hand, then replied, "Sometimes simplicity is the ultimate luxury." Travis squinted, feeling as if he'd just been insulted without a single insult spoken. He leaned in, his voice low but loud enough for a few others to hear. "I'm guessing you've never really known what it feels like to belong in places like this. Some people, even if they can buy a ticket, never truly deserve the seat." For the first time, Nathan fully turned to Travis. His eyes were no longer passively observing, they were deep, steady, and quietly powerful. "So tell me," he said, "who do you think truly deserves it? The one who knows how to spend money, or the one who knows how to treat people with kindness?" Travis gave a cold smile. "I choose the one who knows how to win, who knows how to rise, who proves they're superior." Nathan nodded, as if something had just become clearer to him. He gently placed the bottle of water on the tray table and said, "Interesting, but you know, some people rise by pushing others down, and then there are those who quietly lift others up, even when no one notices." The cabin fell unusually silent. That line wasn't just for Travis. It echoed in the hearts of everyone seated nearby. Because who among us hasn't judged someone by their appearance at least once? Travis leaned back in his seat, growing uneasy, though he couldn't quite say why. The air in first class was still as cool as ever, but beads of sweat had begun to form on his forehead, not from the temperature, but from a strange, unfamiliar feeling he wasn't used to being challenged, and having no way to respond. He had faced rivals in business, debated with CEOs, convinced entire boards of investors with firm tones and sharp words. But here, in front of Nathan, a man who said little, didn't retaliate, and simply existed, he found himself shaken. Because Travis had never prepared for being outmatched by silence. He glanced at Nathan, the man sitting calmly, eyes gazing out at the blue sky through the window. No tension, no sign of victory, just stillness. Travis smirked, trying to claw back control. He leaned in slightly, lowered his voice. "I'll be honest, I don't understand people like you. Maybe it's because I come from a world where, if you don't prove yourself, you get crushed." Nathan didn't turn his head. His voice rose, more like a quiet observation than a rebuttal. "Maybe it's because I come from a place where, if you keep trying to prove yourself, eventually you forget who you are." The words landed like a gentle tap on glass, and the first crack in the mask Travis had worn for so long began to show. He went silent for a few seconds. Then, almost unintentionally, he asked without the sarcasm, for the first time, "Do you really believe being kind is enough?" Nathan turned to him. There was no judgment in his face, no preaching, only a deeply human understanding. No, I don't believe that. But I do believe, if you don't start with kindness, nothing else will ever be enough. The answer too simple to argue with, too true to dismiss. Travis turned away, adjusting his collar, though really it was to hide the growing discomfort on his face. He didn't realize that, in his effort to maintain power, he was slowly losing control of the conversation, and Nathan remained in his seat, not needing to win, not needing to prove anything, not needing to be acknowledged. And that was what Travis couldn't stand the most. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted, though no one meant to listen in. Each word exchanged between Nathan and Travis seemed to carry a strange, magnetic pull. A few passengers leaned in slightly, some exchanged quiet glances. And Travis, the man who boarded the plane like he owned it now, sat motionless, fingers tightening around the armrest. He was feeling the one thing he hated most in the world, losing control. Not because Nathan spoke loudly, but because what Nathan said had touched something he always tried to bury. "I don't need anyone teaching me how to live," Travis snapped, his tone sharpening. "I make money. I built myself up. I don't need life lessons from some guy drinking water in first class." Nathan didn't move, but his gaze had changed. It was no longer just calm. It was the look of someone who had seen something behind the anger. He tilted his head slightly and asked, gently, "Are you talking to me, or trying to convince yourself?" That question pierced straight through the outermost layer of armor. Travis froze, and for a moment a fleeting, unfamiliar expression crossed his face. Not anger, not disdain, but confusion. "I don't have anything to prove," Travis murmured, almost in a whisper. Yet his fingers were quietly fidgeting with the wedding ring on his left hand. Nathan noticed. He didn't ask. He simply continued, slowly, as if speaking not to Travis, but into the very air between them. "I've met many people like you, successful, strong. They have everything, except one thing: peace. And sometimes, the harder people try to look like they're okay, the more shattered they are inside." Travis turned to face Nathan directly. "You don't know me. You don't know what I had to give up to get where I am." Nathan nodded. "You're right. I don't know. But I don't need to know. To understand one thing, when someone constantly needs to prove themselves, it might be because they've never truly believed they're enough." A long silence followed. Travis sat still. No one in the cabin said a word. Only the hum of the engine remained soft and steady, like a quiet breath between two people locked in a conversation no one expected to happen. At 35,000 feet in the air, and for the first time since he boarded the plane, Travis had nothing left to say, because deep down, he knew Nathan had seen the very thing he himself was still running from. Travis gripped the armrest tighter. His eyes darted around the cabin as if searching for someone, or a way to escape from himself. Nathan's silence wasn't surrender, and it wasn't agreement. It was a calm so unwavering. It made Travis feel completely exposed. And then, like a balloon stretched too tight, Travis burst. He shot up from his seat, knocking over the champagne glass on the tray. The golden liquid splashed, soaking into the fabric of his expensive slacks. But Travis didn't care. His voice rang out through the first-class cabin. "You think you're better than me, sitting there with your cheap philosophy, acting like you've figured out life, like you understand people." The entire cabin fell silent. Heads turned, some wide-eyed, some concerned. A flight attendant rushed over, her voice calm but urgent. "Sir, please, we need you to stay calm." But Travis wasn't listening. He was locked in eyes fixed on Nathan, who still sat quietly in his seat, not flinching, not afraid, not fighting back, just silent, but with a presence that filled the space. Travis kept going. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I had to give up to get here. You think kindness is enough. In this world, if you don't roar, people will walk right over you." Nathan waited for the storm of rage to pass, and then he spoke, his voice as soft as a sigh, but solid as cold steel. "I never thought I was better than you, and I never came here to beat you. I just believe when a man has to yell to prove his worth, maybe he's no longer hearing himself anymore." That line, sharp and precise, was the final needle, deflating the armor Travis had worn for so long. He stood there, frozen. His eyes wavered. His chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. His fists were still clenched, but not out of rage anymore. It was something else. He was holding on, trying not to fall apart. Nathan looked at him not like a victor, but like someone who understood. "You don't need to prove anything to me, but if everything you do is just to be seen, then you've already handed your life over to other people's eyes." Travis sat down. Not because the flight attendant asked him to, not because he was ashamed, but because he no longer had the strength to stand in front of the truth. The entire first-class cabin fell silent, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a kind of quiet respect, one not easily named. And Nathan, just as before, gently placed his hand on the bottle of water and said nothing. The plane continued its steady journey across the Pacific sky. Travis sat still. His eyes had softened, though his face still held the confusion, the look of a man who had just fallen from a mountaintop, by asking himself the question, "Who am I?" without the eyes of others to define me. At that moment, a flight attendant approached. She leaned slightly toward Nathan, her voice soft, but carrying a tone of unmistakable respect. "Mr. Cole, the captain asked me to extend his regards and to confirm that the connection for the Tokyo Film Summit has been fully arranged." Travis froze. He turned abruptly. What? What did you just call him?" The attendant paused for a beat, then gave a polite smile and nodded. "Mr. Nathan Cole, Palme d'Or-winning director, Oscar nominee." This flight was arranged specifically for his invitation to the International Summit in Tokyo. The cabin felt as if it had just heard breaking news, an emotional earthquake. A few passengers gasped. Some turned fully in their seats to get a better look, and Travis went pale. "No, no way," he whispered. "You're Nathan Cole, the man behind Solace, Silent Winds, Those films that won dozens of awards. Nathan gave a small nod, his expression unchanged. I didn't think it was necessary to introduce myself with titles. Travis opened his mouth, as if to say something, but nothing came out. He glanced around, saw the stares now directed at him, no longer admiring, but judging. Because for the last hour, he had mocked, belittled, lectured one of the most respected figures in the world of cinema. And Nathan, still seated, still calm, never once using his status to retaliate, never needing to expose anyone. And it was that silence that made Travis feel the most humiliated. I didn't know, Travis stammered. I didn't know who you were. If I had known, then Nathan cut him off. Not sharply, not cruelly, just a single line like a nail driven firmly into wood. If you have to know who I am in order to treat me with respect, then the problem isn't who I am, it's how you see other people. Travis lowered his head. For the first time, he had nothing to argue, nothing to blame, only the heavy silence now sitting in his chest like a weight. He couldn't say another word. That earlier storm of anger, now just smoke. And like all smoke, when it clears, all that remains is the scent of ashes and the ruin left behind. The name Nathan Cole. A name Travis had once admired, once held as a symbol of cinematic greatness, was now sitting right beside him. Not with spotlights, not with bodyguards, not with accolades. Just a bottle of water, and a calm so unwavering, it felt unreal. Travis sat up straighter and turned to face him. No more crossed legs, no more arrogant gaze, just a man trying to gather the scattered pieces of a pride that had just come crashing down. I owe you an apology, Travis said, his voice noticeably lower. Not because you're Nathan Cole, but because I acted like someone I wouldn't even want to see in the mirror. Nathan didn't respond immediately. He looked at the man across from him, no longer the boastful Travis Grant, but someone truly facing himself for the first time. After a few seconds, Nathan gave a quiet nod. An apology is a good start, but what matters more is what you do with it. Travis nodded slightly, then turned to the window. His eyes reflected the endless stretch of white clouds as if searching for a version of himself, before success pulled him away. You know, Travis said slowly, like someone exhaling for the first time in years, I grew up in a neighborhood where, if you didn't prove you were strong, or smart, or rich, you were invisible. I promised myself that one day I'd sit in the front row, eat the finest meals, and never let anyone look down on me again. He let out a bitter smile. Who would have thought I'd become the one looking down on others? Nathan remained silent. He knew sometimes the most important thing isn't to respond, but to let the other person hear their own words and recognize the truth they've been running from. Travis turned back to him, his voice genuine now. Thank you. Not for forgiving me, but for not reacting the way I probably deserved. If it had been me, I might have walked away or lashed out. But you didn't. Nathan answered softly. I'm not here to teach anyone a lesson on. But sometimes, life itself teaches us the most valuable ones right when we least expect it. The two of them sat in silence, but this time it wasn't a silence of tension. It was the stillness between two people, one who had held fast to what he believed, and one who had just begun to rediscover who he was. No one said it out loud, but everyone in first class could feel it. Something had changed. The atmosphere that once went silent from tension now felt warmer, calmer, lighter. Some passengers no longer looked at Travis with judgment in their eyes. Instead, they looked at him as if witnessing a new person being born from the wreckage of the old one. Nathan didn't say another word. He picked up a thin book, turned a few pages, as if he were simply enjoying an ordinary flight. But Travis hadn't read a single line. He was reading something else, his life, rewinding all the times he'd spoken harshly to employees, rewinding the looks he had ignored because they weren't in his league, rewinding the image of himself, a man in a tailored suit, always speaking with force, yet constantly whispering to himself that he was enough. Just then, a young boy, no more than 10, seated a few rows back beside his mother, leaned in and asked softly, "Mom, is that man the one who makes movies?" The mother nodded and smiled. "That's right. But what I like most is how he treats people." Travis heard it, and for the first time in years, he felt a kind of shame that was right. Not the shame of being exposed, but the shame of realizing true worth isn't in how you look, it's in what you leave behind. He bowed his head, then slowly removed his expensive Rolex watch, the same one that always made him feel a notch above everyone else whenever he wore it. But now, that watch felt unbearably heavy on his wrist. He slipped it into his pocket, as if laying down a symbol of something he was ready to let go of, in order to become who he truly was. Outside the window, the sun was beginning to set. Golden light spilled across the clouds, a gentle farewell as the day came to a close. But inside Travis, a new day was beginning, not with thunder, but with a quiet whisper from a conscience he had never dared to listen to. The plane began its descent into Tokyo. Outside the window, the sky shifted from soft gold to a quiet grey. The city appeared below, glimmering like a dream, just real enough to touch, much like the moment Travis was now living. The pilot's voice came over the speaker. Seatbelts clicked into place. Suitcases were pulled from overhead compartments. All the usual sounds of landing suddenly felt unfamiliar, because something had changed. Travis turned to Nathan. No more fancy words, no more arguments, just a single, simple gesture, and perhaps the most sincere one yet. He extended his hand. "Thank you." Nathan looked at him, then reached out and took the hand in his. A brief handshake, but firm, certain, no more words needed. Because sometimes the deepest things aren't said out loud. Travis looked like he wanted to say something else, maybe an invitation, a question, a wish to stay connected. But Nathan was already standing, slinging his backpack over his shoulder and smiling. "We're all on our way somewhere, aren't we?" And then he walked away. Nathan's unassuming figure blended into the sea of travelers at the airport. as if he had never stood out from the world at all. No bodyguards, no fanfare, no one noticing except those who had truly seen the man beneath the surface. Travis stayed where he was. He watched until Nathan disappeared beyond the glass doors. And then, suddenly, that line echoed in his mind. We're all on our way somewhere. Maybe, this time, Travis's destination wasn't on any map. Maybe it was somewhere within, a new journey, one that didn't begin with a passport, but with a different way of seeing the world. He let out a breath. But it wasn't the kind of breath you release when you're exhausted. It was the kind you take when a weight you didn't even realize you were carrying finally lifts. And amid the bustle of Tokyo's airport, Travis Grant, a man who once lived only to be noticed, walked slowly, quietly, no longer needing approval, only to be better than he was yesterday. A man who once believed he had to shout to be heard, now chose silence to truly understand. A man who once thought his worth came from a first-class ticket and $1,000 suit, now felt the greatest relief in shedding everything that no longer felt like himself. And a man dressed simply, drinking water, offering no introductions, taught an entire plane cabin and all of us a lesson no classroom could ever teach. You don't need to prove anything if you're living truthfully. You don't need to be known to do something meaningful. And you don't need to raise your voice to be noticed if you can move people into silence. In a world fueled by competition, comparison, and glittering displays, sometimes kindness is the greatest act of rebellion. Maybe you've been like Travis, always trying to appear strong, successful, superior, because deep down you feared that if you weren't above, you'd be stepped on. But what if the moment you choose to lower your voice is when you truly rise above it all? And if you've ever been like Nathan, not needing to prove anything, just choosing to live in alignment with who you really are, then thank you, because the world needs more people like you. If this story touched something in you, share it, because maybe, somewhere out there, someone's waiting for a reason to take off the mask and start living with honesty. Hit like, subscribe, and help us spread stories that remind us what it means to be human.